Welcome to the King Tales. Thank you for the love and support. Let's dive in. You are useless. Elizabeth screamed. Completely useless. Yugochi stood frozen, her body stiff and her eyes lowered. Elizabeth paced across the sitting room, breathing heavily as though searching for something to throw. I am tired of you, she continued sharply. Every day it's one problem after another. First you embarrass me in front of my guests, now you are destroying my things. More, please, Yugochi said softly. I didn't mean. Shut up. Elizabeth's house stood on a quiet street behind a tall gate and high walls lined with sharp metal. From the outside, it looked like a place of peace and success. The paint was fresh, the flowers neatly trimmed, and the cars in the compound shone as if washed every day. But inside, the house felt cold. Not just because of the air conditioner, though it was always too cool, but because of the way people spoke to one another, the way eyes avoided kindness, and the way silence lingered in corners like a watchful shadow. Every morning, Yugochi woke before sunrise. Her alarm rang at 4:45 a.m., and she would lie still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of her small room at the back of the house near the kitchen. The room was barely large enough for a narrow bed, a plastic chair, and a wooden box that held her few belongings. Today again, she would whisper to herself. She knelt beside her bed, not to impress anyone, but to steady her heart. God, give me strength, she prayed quietly. Help me do right, even when it's hard. After washing her face in a small basin and tying her wrapper tightly around her waist, she slipped on a plain top and worn slippers, covered her hair with a scarf, and went to the kitchen before 5:30 am. The kitchen was modern and wide, with shining tiles and a large refrigerator, yet it brought her no joy, only duty. She moved quickly and silently, afraid of making mistakes. She boiled water, cleaned the counters, checked the pantry, and laid out bread, eggs, fruit, and tea. Elizabeth liked everything arranged perfectly. If the bread was sliced too thick, she complained. If the tea was not hot enough, she complained. If a spoon was slightly crooked, she complained. Yugochi had learned the rules of the house like someone struggling to master a difficult language. Sorry never softened Elizabeth's heart. At 6:15 a.m., footsteps echoed down the stairs. Elizabeth entered in a silk robe, her face already tight with irritation. Her hair was wrapped in a towel. She surveyed the kitchen like an inspector. Good morning, Ma, Yugochi greeted politely. Elizabeth did not reply. She lifted the cup, sniffed the tea, and frowned. This is weak. Sorry, Ma. Elizabeth raised her hand. Don't start your long story. Just do it properly. Yes, Ma. Yugochi quickly poured the tea away and prepared another cup, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady them. Where is my vitamin? Elizabeth asked without looking up from her phone. In your drawer, Ma. I will bring it now. Yugochi hurried upstairs, retrieved the vitamin, and placed it gently beside Elizabeth's plate with a glass of water. Elizabeth swallowed it impatiently, then finally looked at her. We have visitors today. My friends will be here by noon. The house must be perfect. Yes, Ma. And wear something neat. Not like you're coming from a village meeting. Yes, Ma. Elizabeth left the table half-eaten and walked away. Yugochi cleared the dishes and began her endless list of chores, sweeping, mopping, dusting every corner, polishing glass tables, changing bedsheets, scrubbing bathrooms, and washing clothes. There was no time to rest. When she paused to stretch, a sharp pain shot through her lower back. She pressed her hand against it and breathed deeply. Her thoughts drifted to her daughter, Adoni. Adoni was 8 years old and had been living with her in the small room behind the kitchen for 3 months. Before that, she stayed with an aunt in the village who struggled to care for many children. When Yugochi begged Elizabeth to allow Adoni to stay, Elizabeth agreed, not out of kindness, but because she knew it would make Ugochi work harder. Fine, Elizabeth had said. But if she disturbs my house, she will go back. So Adoni stayed quiet, too quiet sometimes. She knew which rooms she must not enter. She greeted Elizabeth from a distance and quickly stepped aside. But at night, inside their tiny room, she became a child again. That thought gave Ugochi a little strength. Around 10:30 a.m., Elizabeth called from upstairs. Soon she came down dressed in a fitted gown and high heels, her hair styled and her makeup flawless. She looked ready for a grand event. I'm stepping out. I'll be back before they arrive, she said. Yes, Ma. Elizabeth paused at the door. Do not let your child come to the front when my friends are here. Yes, Ma. And if you embarrass me today, you will regret it. The gates shut behind her. Ugochi stood still for a moment, her heart racing, then returned to her walk. By 11:45 a.m., the house sparkled. The air smelled of soap and perfume. She changed into a simple black gown, neat and clean, and tied her scarf carefully. Adoni sat on the bed holding a small notebook. Mommy, she asked softly, are they coming today? Yes. Will Madam shout? Ugochi sat beside her daughter and pulled her close. I don't know, she said gently. But whatever happens, don't be afraid. Even if you feel afraid, don't let fear control you. At exactly 12:10 p.m., the doorbell rang. Ugochi's stomach tightened. She walked to the door and opened it. Two elegant women stood outside, dressed brightly and smelling of perfume. One wore her hair short, the other had long braids. Behind them stood a man in glasses, holding a small gift bag. Hello, the first woman said, looking Ugochi up and down as if measuring her worth. Good afternoon, Ma, Ugochi replied politely. Please, come in. The visitor stepped inside and settled in the sitting room. Ugochi offered them water on a tray. Thank you, the man with glasses said kindly. The second woman waved her hand. No. Not yet. Where is Elizabeth? She stepped out, Ma. She will be back soon, Ugochi answered. The first woman leaned back and glanced around. This house is always neat. Elizabeth knows how to maintain standards. Ugochi gave a small smile but said nothing. The second woman laughed lightly. Of course, if you have help, everything must be perfect. That's why I tell people, if you don't have help, don't pretend. Ugochi felt her cheeks grow warm. She gently placed the tray down and stepped back. A few minutes later, Elizabeth entered with a bright, polished smile, as though she had changed into another person entirely. My people, she exclaimed warmly. Welcome. There were hugs, laughter, and compliments. Elizabeth's voice turned sweet, her face soft and charming. It was the same mouth, but it carried a different spirit. She sat among them like a queen holding court. Ugochi, she called pleasantly, bring the snacks. Yes, Ma. Ugochi returned with neatly arranged snacks and drinks, placing them carefully on the table. Elizabeth watched her closely. Then, still smiling at her guest, she clicked her tongue. What is this? Ugochi froze. Ma. The glass is too close to the plate. Do you want my guest to struggle? Sorry, Ma. She quickly adjusted it. Elizabeth laughed softly. You see why I have to be strict. If you don't control people, they will climb on your head. Her friends laughed in agreement. Ugochi's chest tightened. The man with glasses shifted uncomfortably and cleared his throat before taking a sip of his drink. The first woman nodded. You are right. Staff need a strong hand. Elizabeth looked satisfied, as if she had delivered a wise lesson. Wipe that table again, she added smoothly. I can see dust. There was no dust, but Ugochi nodded. Yes, Ma. She fetched a cloth and wiped the spotless surface while feeling their eyes on her. She felt like part of the furniture, something to be adjusted and displayed. Some people are lucky, the second woman said. Imagine living in this kind of house. Elizabeth laughed. Lucky. Or hardworking. The conversation moved on to drivers, loyalty, and complaints about people who chop money and run. Yugochi stood quietly, waiting. Go and bring the cake from the fridge, Elizabeth ordered. Yugochi did as she was told. The cake box was cold in her hands. As she opened it, her grip slipped slightly and the knife made a small clinking sound against the plate. Elizabeth's eyes sharpened instantly. Are you okay? She asked, her tone sugary but edged with warning. Yes, Ma. Sorry, Ma. Elizabeth laughed again. You see. If I don't watch them, they will break everything. The women laughed. Yugochi wished she could disappear. She finished serving the cake, her movement steady though her heart felt heavy. The man with glasses glanced at her briefly, as if he wanted to speak, but remained silent. After an hour, the guests stood to leave. Elizabeth escorted them to the gates with hugs and bright smiles. When the gates closed and their car drove away, the house fell silent. Elizabeth's smile vanished. She turned sharply and walked inside, her heels striking the floor with hard clicks. Yugochi began clearing the table. You embarrassed me, Elizabeth said coldly. Ma. Yugochi looked confused. That cake moment. You almost made me look bad in front of my friends. Ma, I didn't. Don't talk. Just listen. Yugochi lowered her eyes. And your child, Elizabeth added. Make sure she doesn't come out. I don't want a small girl running around my house. Yes, Ma. Sometimes I wonder if you people understand simple instructions. I understand, Ma. Then act like it. Elizabeth walked upstairs, leaving Yugochi standing there with shame weighing heavily on her shoulders. Evening came quietly. Yugochi finished cleaning, washing, mopping, arranging, restoring the house to perfection once more. Elizabeth later ate dinner without conversation, giving short commands without looking up from her phone. Bring water. Turn off that light. Close the curtain. Yugochi obeyed every word. When Elizabeth finally retired for the night, Yugochi returned to her small room. Adoni sat on the bed with a small torchlight and her notebook open. The room felt warmer than the grand house, not because of luxury, but because love lived there. Mommy, you're back, Adoni said softly. I'm back, Yugochi replied, lowering herself into the chair. Are you okay? Yugochi paused. She wanted to say yes quickly. Instead, she pulled her daughter onto her lap. I'm tired, she admitted gently. But I'm okay. Did Madam shout? Not like before. But she spoke in a way that hurt. Adoni frowned. Why does she hurt you? Yugochi looked into her daughter's serious eyes. Some people believe that if they don't press others down, others will climb over them. Like when she says, if you don't control people, they will climb your head. Yes, Yugochi said softly. That's what she believes. Is it true? No, my child. Respect is not forced with fear. Respect grows when you treat people well. Adoni leaned against her. Why is she happy with her friends and mean to you? Because some people show their best face outside and their real face inside. There was a moment of quiet. Mommy, you said we will read today. Yugochi smiled faintly. Yes, we will. She opened the notebook and pointed to the first line. Adoni read slowly, making small mistakes. Yugochi corrected her gently. No, not that one. Try again. Adoni tried again, slower this time. Good, Yugochi said proudly. Warmth spread through her chest. This small moment felt like water in a dry land. After they finished reading, Adoni looked up. When I grow up, I will not shout at people. That is good, Yugochi said, kissing her forehead. But what if people are wicked to me? What should I do? Yugochi held her daughter's hands carefully. Listen to me. Never repay evil with evil. Protect yourself. Speak up when you must. But don't become like them. Let your success speak for you. Never repay evil with evil, Adoni repeated slowly. Let your success speak for you. Yes. But how will success speak? When you keep learning, when you grow, when you do good, your life will answer those who doubt you. You won't need to fight every battle with your mouth. Adoni thought quietly. I don't like this house, she whispered. It's big, but it's not warm. Yugochi's throat tightened. I know. That's why we create our own warmth here. She touched the notebook. This is our warmth. Kindness is our warmth. God is our warmth. Adoni wiped her eyes. Will we leave one day? Yugochi looked around their small cracked walls and narrow bed. Then she looked at her daughter. Yes, she said softly, holding on to hope. We will leave one day. Adoni rested her head on her mother's shoulder, and Yugochi rocked her gently, protecting the small flame of warmth they had built in a house that did not know how to love. Outside their door, the mansion remained silent and cold, filled with expensive furniture and shining floors. Inside the small back room, however, a mother and child sat close together, sharing letters, sharing truth, and sharing a love that did not need a big house to grow. Before sleeping, Adoni yawned. Mommy, read it again. Which one? Yugochi asked with a gentle smile. The lesson. Yugochi stroked her daughter's hair and repeated the words slowly, like a prayer. Never repay evil with evil. Let your success speak for you. Adoni's eyes closed peacefully. Yugochi watched her breathing for a moment before turning off the torchlight. In the darkness, she lay awake. Her body ached. Her heart ached too. But she held tightly to the lesson she had just spoken. She could not control Elizabeth. She could not change her overnight. But she could guard what lived inside her own heart. In that small room, in a house without warmth, she chose to build her own, one letter, one kind word, one quiet decision at a time. Morning in Lagos did not wait for anyone. Before the sun fully rose, buses roared, horns blared, and traders called out their goods. Conductors shouted destinations from bus doors, motorcycles sped past impatiently, and the city pulsed with restless energy. In the small room behind Elizabeth's mansion, Yugochi woke before her alarm. She listened to the distant traffic, a faint radio somewhere far away, and her daughter's soft breathing. Adoni's school uniform was neatly folded. Her sandals rested under the bed. Her school bag leaned against the wall. School fees were due next week. The thought settled heavily in Yugochi's chest. She rose quietly and began her morning routine. Tea, bread, eggs, cleaning, arranging. Elizabeth came downstairs around 6:30 a.m., dressed for work and scrolling through her phone. Good morning, Ma, Yugochi greeted. Elizabeth nodded slightly. Did you iron my blue dress? Yes, Ma. It's in your room. By the way, Elizabeth added casually, you broke one of my wine glasses last week. It slipped while I was washing, Ma. I apologized. Sorry doesn't replace it, Elizabeth replied. I've deducted it from your salary. And also for the light you forgot to turn off. Ma, I turned it. Are you calling me a liar? No, Ma. I'm sorry. Elizabeth picked up her bag. Be careful next time. If I don't correct you, you won't learn. When she left, Yugochi stood alone in the kitchen, calculating silently. Glass deduction. Light deduction. Would anything remain for school fees? For food? She closed her eyes briefly. God, help me, she whispered. Later that morning, she walked Adoni to the small gate leading to the main road. Go straight to school, she said gently. Yes, Mommy. At school, the classroom was crowded and worn. The pale green paint peeled in places, and old desks bore carved names from years past. Adoni sat in the second row. Her friend Mary leaned closer. Did you hear? There's a scholarship test coming. Scholarship. Adoni's heart jumped. Yes. If you pass, you won't pay fees again. No fees. The words echoed in her mind. Soon, Teacher Grace entered. Calm but observant, she wrote on the board and announced the scholarship exam. It will not be easy, she warned. Only serious and hardworking students should try. Her eyes rested on Adoni. Are you ready to work harder? Yes, teacher. Grace gave extra lessons after school, handing out practice questions. Scholarship is not about luck, she said. It is about preparation. Adoni listened as if her future depended on it, because it did. At home, she rushed to tell her mother. Mommy. If I pass, no more school fees. No more fees. Ugochi repeated slowly, hope and worry mixing in her voice. I will read every day. Ugochi smiled, though she thought about electricity bills and kerosene. We will manage, she said. That night, Elizabeth announced another problem. Salary will delay this month, she said coldly. Until next week. More school fees. Am I your sponsor? If you don't like it, find another job. Ugochi returned to her room with heavy steps but forced a smile for her daughter. Later, after Adoni slept, she counted her remaining money. It was not enough. The next morning, she made a decision. After finishing her housework, she searched for small extra jobs. She washed clothes for a neighbor named Tom. She cleaned an elderly woman's compound on Sundays. Some days she skipped lunch, telling Adoni she had already eaten. Meanwhile, Adoni studied late into the night. When power failed, she read by torchlight. One evening, frustration burst from her. I hate her, she cried. Madam Elizabeth delays your salary. She talks to you like you are nothing. Don't speak like that, Ugochi said gently but firmly. She's wicked. Hate will burn you first before it reaches anyone else, Ugochi replied softly. Bitterness will steal your peace. We will not let her change who we are. Adoni's anger dissolved into tears. It's not fair. I know, her mother said, holding her close. But you will answer with success, not with hate. The scholarship exam day arrived. The school hall was hot, fans turning lazily overhead. Adoni sat with her pencil trembling slightly. She remembered her mother's words. Never repay evil with evil. Let your success speak. Begin, the supervisor announced. Outside, Lagos continued its noisy rhythm. But inside the hall, a small girl wrote as if her future depended on every line. Back at the mansion, Ugochi mopped the floor while Elizabeth complained loudly on the phone. Inside her heart, Ugochi prayed. Let my child's effort not be wasted. Days later, Elizabeth announced another grand dinner. Important people are coming, she said sharply. No mistakes. Preparations filled the week. Curtains were washed, carpets scrubbed, silver polished. Ben, the quiet driver, helped move heavy furniture. Madam wants to impress too much, he whispered once. On Saturday night, the house glittered. Guests arrived in expensive cars. Among them were Linda, loud and flashy, John, Rose, and Mary, who seemed quieter than the rest. During dinner, a small drop of stew slipped near Linda's plate. You are careless, Elizabeth shouted publicly. Do you know how much this dinner cost? The room fell silent. Laughter followed from some guests. Go inside, Elizabeth ordered coldly. Don't show your face here again tonight. Yugochi walked to the kitchen without protest, her step steady though her heart trembled. Behind her, laughter resumed. Later, when the guest left, Elizabeth said calmly, "Next time, I will deduct your salary again." That night, Yugochi returned to the small room. Adoni was awake. She had heard everything, the raised voice, the humiliation, the laughter. When Yugochi entered, Adoni studied her mother's face carefully. "Mommy," she said quietly, her voice trembling, "did you forget yourself tonight?" Yugochi paused. Then, despite everything, she smiled gently and sat beside her daughter. "No, my child," she said softly. "I remembered exactly who I am." "Mommy," Adoni asked softly. Yugochi tried to smile. "You're still awake." Adoni nodded, and they sat together on the thin mat in their tiny new room. For a moment, Yugochi said nothing. The weight of the day pressed heavily on her chest. Then something inside her broke. Tears filled her eyes. She quickly turned her face away, covering her mouth so no sound would escape. She was not crying loudly. She was crying quietly, like someone who had learned not to disturb the world with her pain. Tears rolled down her cheeks not because she was weak, but because she was human. Because being spoken to like you are nothing hurts. Because being laughed at in front of others cuts deep. Because carrying humiliation day after day becomes heavy. Adoni moved closer and wrapped her small arms around her mother. "Don't cry," she whispered, her own eyes shining with tears. Yugochi wiped her face. "I'm okay," she said softly. Adoni shook her head. "You are not okay." For the first time, Yugochi did not pretend. "It hurts," she admitted quietly. Adoni's grip tightened. "I hate this house," she said in a low voice. Yugochi took a slow, steady breath. "My child will not live this life," she said firmly. Adoni looked up at her. "You will study. You will work hard. You will never beg anyone for respect." Adoni nodded slowly. Inside her heart, she made a silent promise. One day, she would rise. One day, no one would speak to her mother like that again. "Bring your book," Yugochi said gently after a few minutes. "Now?" Adoni asked, surprised. "Yes. Now." Even with red eyes and heavy hearts, they opened the notebook. The small torchlight lit the page. Outside, the mansion stood big and silent. Inside that tiny room, hope was growing. The morning everything changed began like any other in Lagos. The city was already awake before sunrise, bus horns in the distance, generators coughing to life, street vendors calling out pure water, in loud, practiced voices. In the back room of Elizabeth's mansion, Yugochi rose quietly and touched Adoni's forehead. Her daughter's face looked peaceful, but tired from studying late. Yugochi stepped into the kitchen and began her routine, boiling water, wiping counters, arranging breakfast. She pushed away memories of the last gathering and focused on what she could control. At 6:30 a.m., Elizabeth came downstairs, her face tight with irritation. "Where is my tea?" she snapped. "It's here, Ma." "It's not hot." "It's steaming, Ma." "Are you arguing with me?" "No, Ma." "Sorry." Orders followed one after another. "Warm the tea. Bring the charger. Clean the guest bathroom again." Yugochi obeyed without protest, scrubbing a bathroom that was already spotless. Before leaving, Elizabeth added sharply, "Don't let your child enter the living room." "I saw her slippers near the hallway." "She didn't enter, Ma." "Maybe the slippers." "I don't want to hear it." When Elizabeth left, silence returned, but not peace. By midday, Yugochi was ironing Elizabeth's white blouse. She was careful. Always careful. But a tiny drop of water fell, and the hot iron rested a second too long. A small brown mark appeared. Yugochi froze. She tried wiping it. She tried soap. The mark spread slightly. Then the gate opened. Elizabeth had returned early. "Where is my white blouse?" she demanded. Yugochi brought it forward with shaking hands. Elizabeth saw the mark. "What is this?" Her voice dropped dangerously low. "More, it's small. I can fix." "You burnt my blouse." "It was not intentional." "You are useless." Elizabeth screamed. "Completely useless." Ben, the driver, stepped in cautiously. "Madam. Stay out of it." Then came the words that changed everything. "Pack your things. I don't need you again. You and your child leave this compound today." Yugochi felt dizzy. "More, please. It's evening. Where will we go?" "That is not my business." 1 hour. "If you are not out, I will call security." Her hands moved quickly but her mind felt slow. She packed Adoni's uniform, books, sandals. She packed her own few clothes. She packed a notebook. Ben appeared quietly with black nylon bags. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Do you have somewhere to go?" She shook her head. He pressed some money into her hand discreetly. "Small transport." "God bless you," she whispered. Then Adoni appeared at the doorway, still in her school uniform. "Mommy, what is happening?" "Madam said we should leave," Yugochi replied gently. "Today?" "Yes." "Will we sleep outside?" Yugochi held her shoulders firmly. "No. God will make a way." They stepped out of the compound. The mansion stood tall and polished, as if it had never held their quiet struggles. "Leave the keys," Elizabeth said coldly. Yugochi placed the key down without a word. Outside, the noise of Lagos hit them like a wave, cars, shouting, frying oil scent mixing with dust. For the first time in a long time, Yugochi had no direction. "Where are we going?" Adoni asked. "We will find a place." They took a crowded bus, squeezed between strangers. The air was hot. A baby cried nearby. The conductor shouted impatiently. They got down near a busy market area and found Rose, a roadside food seller Yugochi once knew. "Yugochi. What happened?" "I lost my job. We have nowhere." Rose's face softened. "Come. Sit." She gave them water and later connected them to an agent named Sam. After bargaining and pleading, they found a tiny room in a crowded compound owned by Mr. Paul. The room was small. Rough cement floor. One small window. Shared toilet outside. But it was a roof. That night, generators roared. Neighbors argued. Babies cried. Music blasted from somewhere nearby. "Mommy, are we safe here?" Adoni whispered. "We are together," Yugochi replied. "I miss our small room in the big house." "I know. Madam Elizabeth just sent us away." Yugochi inhaled slowly. "We will not die. We will not sleep outside. God will make a way." Adoni still looked afraid. Yugochi brought out the notebook. "Open it." "Mommy, I can't hear myself. It's too noisy." "Then read in my ear," Yugochi said softly. "Don't read for the whole world. Read for yourself." Adoni began to read quietly. The generator roared like distant thunder. A door slammed. Someone shouted. But inside that tiny room, something steady continued. A mother's voice. A child's effort. Hope. After reading, Adoni looked up. "Will you find another job?" "Yes." "Will we eat tomorrow?" Yugochi paused. Then she said carefully, "We will do our best. And God will help." She held her daughter close and stared at the rough wall. She remembered Elizabeth's words, "You are no longer needed." Like she was talking about a broken spoon. Yugochi's eyes grew wet again. But this time, she did not cry. She had already cried once. Now, she was thinking. In episode 3, Yugochi did not cry again. Instead, she turned her pain into a decision. My child will not remain in this life, she whispered in her heart. That night, in their tiny rented room in Lagos, she lay beside Adoni and listened to the generators rumbling, people arguing, babies crying, and music playing somewhere in the compound. It was noisy and uncomfortable, but it was theirs. No one could walk in and humiliate her. No one could deduct her pay or order her around. They had lost comfort, but they had gained something else, freedom. Small, difficult freedom. The next morning came with the usual chaos of the compound. Generators coughed to life, women called to one another across the walkway, and radios blared gospel songs. Yugochi woke up slowly, looked at the rough wall, the thin mat, and the small window, and remembered where they were. The reality felt heavy, but not hopeless. She turned to Adoni and whispered, "Today, we keep moving." After joining the long queue for the shared bathroom, she prepared her daughter for school. They ate leftover rice warmed in a small pot. It was simple, but enough. When they reached the school gate, Adoni hesitated. "Mommy, are you ashamed?" she asked softly. Yugochi lifted her chin. "I am not ashamed of honest work," she replied. "We did nothing wrong." In class, Teacher Grace noticed Adoni's tired eyes. After lessons, she called her forward and handed her a scholarship form for junior secondary school. "Education is your ladder," she said gently. Adoni held the paper like treasure. Meanwhile, Yugochi walked from street to street asking for work. At a small restaurant, Janet agreed to let her wash plates. At a laundry shop, Peter offered her ironing work for little pay. It was not much, but it was a start. By evening, her feet ached and her hands were raw from soap, yet her heart carried a small flame of hope. At school, not everyone was kind. During break, a girl named Stella mocked Adoni, saying her mother was just a maid. Some students laughed. Adoni felt the sting, but she remembered her mother's words. She lifted her head and answered calmly, "Yes, she works hard. She is the strongest person I know." The laughter faded. Respect quietly took its place. Weeks passed in hard work and long nights of study. Every evening, even when exhausted, Yugochi sat beside her daughter. "Read again," she would say. And Adoni read. The day of the scholarship results arrived. The classroom was silent as Teacher Grace read out the names. When she called Adoni, time seemed to stop. Then reality rushed back. She had passed. Adoni ran home through the busy streets, bursting into their small room. "Mommy, I passed." For a moment, Yugochi could not speak. Then she pulled her daughter into her arms and whispered, "Thank you, God." Tears filled her eyes, but they were no longer tears of shame. They were tears of victory. That night, they ate gari and sugar, smiling as if it were a feast. Outside, the compound remained noisy. Generators roared, neighbors argued, dogs barked. But inside their small room, there was peace. Shame had tried to follow them from the mansion, but dignity had grown stronger. Education was no longer just a dream, it was a door opening. And for the first time, their future felt bigger than their present.